I have that window up too, just to make sure when it starts streaming.
Hooray.
How do I get out of here? Have that window up too, just to make sure when it starts. Okay.
All right.
Okay. Streaming.
Good, right? And then I'm going to start recording. All right, so I think we can begin. Hello, everybody. All right, so we'll bring to order the Board of Education virtual meeting of December 1st, 2020. This meeting is being recorded and is fully virtual. I ask that all participants mute themselves to prevent the meeting from interference with the meeting, and that you unmute yourself using *6. I also ask that everyone wait to be recognized by the chair before speaking so that the people who are listening by phone are able to identify the person talking. This meeting is being held remotely with access by phone or streaming as indicated on the agenda on the website, on the district website. Having said all that, I think we can say our Pledge of Allegiance, and I'll share my screen so that we have a flag, and then we can say the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. And that'll take us to our statement of commitment to community. If Mr. D'Elia, you'd be willing to read that statement for us?
Gladly. As citizens of our community, we will conduct ourselves in accordance with Newtown's core character attributes as displayed in our character tree. We will be responsible for our actions and show respect for each other. We will interact peacefully, productively, and politely. We will be trustworthy and honest and show compassion toward others. Newtown's continued success is contingent upon our ability to persevere, to follow through with our commitments, and to stay focused on the greater good.
Great, thank you. All right, and that brings us to our consent agenda. So I'll entertain a motion on the consent.
The Board of Education approved the consent agenda, which includes the correspondence report.
Second.
All right, so Mr. D'Elia makes the motion, Mr. Cruson seconds the motion. Is there anything to be removed from the agenda? All right, so all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And
Aye.
any opposed? None, so that passes unanimously. And that'll bring us to our public participation. I don't think we have public here, but I will just make the statement that during the first public participation, we welcome commentary on items that are on the agenda. We just ask that speakers be respectful and limit their comments to no more than 3 minutes. Are there any members of the public who would like to address the board at this time? And you can unmute your phone with a *6 if you'd like to make a comment during public participation. All right, I don't see anybody, so we will move on from public participation and begin with reports, starting with the chair report. So The committee assignments, I know I talked about that at our last meeting. I will share that before our next meeting. The CABE Delegate Assembly happened on November 19th. If you recall, that's the assembly where CABE sets the legislative agenda, well, the resolutions that then lead to the legislative agenda for the year. I offered an amendment to an existing resolution entitled Creating Educational Excellence Through Economic, Racial, and Ethnic Integration that would add some of the language from Newtown's resolution on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that passed. As part of that amendment, I included some language that asks the legislature and/or the State Department of Education to take a position discouraging the use of Indigenous people as mascots. This is an issue that came up the last legislative session, and Newtown, as you know, has a history with this. We have people who are still very much involved with that issue, and that passed as well. So I'm happy to report on that. And then I also wanted to share my frustration with the governor's approach to keeping schools open. It's been a very heavy on the pressure campaign and light on the support. And so essentially, without taking much action to limit indoor activities or provide more accessible testing to schools, the governor continually says that schools being open is very important. And I think we would agree with that. Everybody who's working with students knows how important that is. And he says that he will fight like heck to keep schools open. That's a quote. Yet the Connecticut Department of Public Health maintains a website that still indicates that our current Newtown numbers are well over the limit for closing schools. And many, many districts in Connecticut are at that point right now. So I think this mixed messaging puts superintendents and health directors in a stressful position of making decisions under incredible public pressure. And it comes from both directions, in part because of that mixed messaging that's happening. So rather than supporting superintendents with guidelines and district health directors that adhere to the science and data, it's really speaking to the public pressure piece. And I'm frustrated with that. And I would like to write a letter to that effect. And I'm happy to share that with the board if anyone is interested. I don't know I'll tell you what, I'll share it with board members. I'm writing it as a personal letter. I will put, I'm the chair of the Board of Education in Newtown, but I won't write it from the Board of Ed's perspective unless you'd like me to. And then December 8th, next week, we have a 7 p.m. meeting with CABE's Nick Caruso to discuss efficient and effective meetings. And so I look forward to doing that. And that concludes my report. I don't know if you have any questions on any of those items or comments. Yes, Ms. Harriman-Stites.
I mean, obviously not without getting into a big discussion with the other board members. I just wonder if it would be more powerful for a letter like that to come from the board. But again, I don't know if there is, agreement on the rest of the board members' parts that we should be doing something like that. But I do completely agree with you that, the mixed messaging and, this has sort of been from the beginning, and so I think, especially now when folks aren't seeing that much change in indoor restaurants and bars, yet we're closing schools. I don't think folks understand that part of the reason we are closing schools is because a lot of our staff has been mandatory quarantined, and it's not safe for us to open schools with our staffing levels. But I do think that we're put in a very difficult position by the governor and his approach. And while I do support a lot of the decisions he's made throughout the pandemic, I do think that we could use a lot more support as an educational system at this point. So, I would be happy to sign on to that letter, but I don't know how the other board members feel about that.
Yeah. I don't know how other board members feel about speaking up about that now, or would you rather? Yes, Ms. Ledline.
So I guess I agree with everything that's been said. I guess my question would be, what exactly would the letter request? Would it request, you talked about more assistance. Are you going to specify what that might look like? We talked about not having a mixed message. What kind of guidance are you looking for from the governor's office? I guess I'm kind of curious as to, talking about here the concerns and the issues that we have, but what do we feel would make the situation more palatable and make Newtown a better district if we had certain changes?
I guess I would like to request that the Department of Public Health, if the guidelines that were put out originally are not something that that was meant to be sort of markers by which we would make meaning the superintendent and district health directors together would make decisions about which models would be most appropriate. They now speak of it as a continuum, and the governor saying that he would fight like heck to keep schools open. We still need to have guidelines, and I don't know it would be good if those could be clearly communicated. They're still on the website, but yet that's not the message that the governor is giving.
May I ask a follow-up question?
Yeah.
Does the State Board of Education have any direction with regard to schools and the decisions that school districts need to make in these situations? I mean, obviously we can't open if we have unsafe conditions due to staffing levels. Do they have any guidance as to situations where that occurs, or what's their stand on it?
I haven't heard the State Department of Education holds these meetings in concert with the Department of Public Health, but the State Board of Education, I'm not sure if they're making, yes, Dr. Rodriguez.
So I was going to address this in my COVID update, and I can speak to it in more detail then. But the State Board and the DPH, in fact, I just had a meeting. We have weekly meetings to discuss this. So there aren't any current guidelines other than what you saw at the beginning of the year, which were the thresholds and the data. But that has changed in many ways, especially because we know more about the virus and the spread of infection. But I will talk about it later, that they're really looking at every district as being unique, because every district has very unique factors. And that's really the issue here, because there are some districts, as you know, Danbury hasn't opened at all for a variety of reasons. So I think in that case, it's a little challenging. But there are some general discussions that we've had about what factors to look at. For example, staffing is huge, and that's why we're on remote this week for that very reason. So I can address it a little bit more when I get to it later this evening.
So given that, and because I don't want to start I've already started a whole discussion right now, but I suppose if the board has to discuss the board, we could add that as an agenda item. Like, otherwise, I think
Michelle, we're having a problem with you,
Yeah, we're
hearing you.
Ah. All right, I'm gonna try again. Can you hear me now?
Yes, much better.
Okay. So I think short of adding something to the end of this meeting agenda, I would say that we should probably, I can write a letter and you can provide feedback to me as to whether you'd like to sign on to the letter or not. If that's okay with everybody, unless you have a better suggestion. Okay. All right. Any other questions before we move on to the superintendent's report? No. All right, so Dr. Rodrigue, would you like to fill us in?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Coos. So first of all, I wanted to welcome you all back. I hope everyone had a really nice, peaceful Thanksgiving. We are in our second day back in remote learning, and I know I'm going to speak to some of the changes and decisions that I will have to be making, as you talked about that a little bit, Dr. Koo. I will be meeting with Donna Colbert and Ann Dalton, who I see is on the line with us, and we'll speak later on when we get to the COVID updates. But right now, I just want to talk a little bit about our staffing, as I do every month. We had one retirement in November, and that's Ed Obloy, a Newtown High School social studies teacher, effective January. We had one resignation, Nancy Conran, our ELL teacher. And we had some new hires at Newtown High School. Deborah Howard, our special education flex teacher, who will start mid-December, and our social studies teacher, Elizabeth Mushantet, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, who starts in January. And of course, we have the ELL, Nancy's position, that will be open. Just to break it down, as Suzanne DeRamo does now, with non-certified and certified. We've hired no certified teachers. We've hired 3 new building subs, very helpful. We've hired 5 paraeducators this month, and I know we were down, as you know, from the beginning of the year. So we're happy to welcome some new paras to the district. And our assistant director of business was just hired. So we're really excited about that. Again, we're trying to fill, we're getting close to our staffing needs, but again, that fluctuates and changes. And that's all I have this evening.
Great, thank you. Does anybody have any questions or comments? All right, we'll move on to committee reports then. Let's see, which committee, who would like to go first?
I can speak, Michelle.
My speaker is not working.
John, go ahead. Why don't you speak? And then I'll go after
Okay,
you.
thank you. All right. So the CNI met on the 24th of November, and Amy Deeb was with us making her presentation on conversations on race, which you'll hear about tonight, so I won't elaborate on that. I do want to call your attention to Ann Uberity's update with regard to there are a number of items. One is the curriculum calendar. We will not be having any curriculum presented to us in January because of budgetary protocols and discussions. So that will help. The 8th of December, Tom Einhorn, along with Ann and Frank, and I believe Jim Ross, will be presenting to us the proposed new schedule for the middle school, which will be a long time in coming. And also spoke to us about the schedules that are connected to the remote learning model. And I want to highlight the fact that the schedules that were included in the models for instruction document were sample schedules because there was no way to know what exactly to expect as the year unfolded. The schedules were never intended to decrease instructional time. They were intended to provide flexibility for teachers in order to provide effective instruction without over-relying on screen time. So as this particular week unfolds, they will be seeking, Frank and Ann, to continue ensuring that they get feedback on optimal learning experiences for students under this, as she says, challenging and continually evolving situation, which we knew would happen. I mentioned in particular about grade level consistency so that all the children across grade levels were experiencing comparable learning experiences. And Anne agreed that this was extremely important and that the clarifying email that she sent would ensure that. She also noted that the days are full days and parents should know that their students will be online for the full day with breaks in between, and even if the schedule shifts, this should not impact parents greatly. And that concludes the CNI report. Thank you.
Dr. Koo, can I add to what Mr. Boris just spoke about?
Yeah.
So just so you know, Ann and I met with the Teachers Union, the NFT, just before it was 4:30 today. And so we did speak at length. It was an 1.5-hour meeting just talking about what we'd like to see with remote learning moving forward. So right now we're in the gathering input from teachers, and I know Ann is, Ann, if you want to say a few words about that as well, but it was a really, I thought, a very good meeting.
It was very productive and not surprising what some of the feedback was, because we had gotten some of that feedback in just speaking to teachers. But it was helpful to have a group together, a representative group, and hear their concerns and make sure that they felt that their concerns were heard. So we'll be working closely with them to make sure that things are clear moving forward.
Great, thank you. Okay, so Mr. D'Elia, did you have CIP facility?
Can I ask a question about curriculum first?
Oh, yes.
Is there any data, or have you guys, has anyone received any results from how things are going so far that's quantifiable? And maybe that's to you.
It's a great question. We have some data at the lower levels. They administer the DRA, in particular, the degrees of the developmental reading assessment. We don't have any district-wide data. We were right nearing the end of the window of the NWEA when we switched to remote. However, I actually our window is supposed to close on December 3rd, and I'm in the process of getting feedback from the principals to see how complete their testing is. We may end up extending the window a couple of days to get in as much testing as we can. And then once that window closes, we'll have some data for K-8. Most of what we have right now is anecdotal. And it does seem that there are some gaps, but I can tell you that I haven't looked deeply at the data, but there are some very encouraging trends in some of what we're seeing.
Thank you very much.
And I should add that I will report to you once we have that. I'll bring a report to you so that you know where we stand.
Again, thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, so are there any other questions on curriculum and instruction? All right, so move on to Mr. Glidden, were you ready to speak on the CIP, facilities, finance?
Yeah, I'll try to do my best. There's been a number of meetings between Board of Finance, Public Building, and Site. The majority of the discussions have been around the CIP and more specifically the Hawley project. And I'm going to summarize what my understanding of where we are right now. The Board of Finance, the good news is the project's moving forward. The project is not, the Board of Finance made some adjustments to the CIP. I believe it's 1.5 million this year rather than the 4.2 million that was originally on the CIP. And let me take a step back. We received a proposal of 6.3 million. So that was kind of a shocker to everyone. We were well over 2 million for an estimate from the engineering company. They also moved a couple things up in the CIP. I believe they moved up a generator. They moved lighting for Reed, boilers for Reed, and I believe lighting for Hedda Meadow. And they moved back the middle school project, or they're recommending to move back. I'm sorry, the legislative council will make the final decision on all this. But I believe they moved back the middle school project, which is actually a 2-year move back because we have a year with a 0 year for the CIP. I know I wrote down. A lot of discussion about hiring a construction manager for the project, someone that is paid to manage the Hawley project. So to sum up everything, the project is moving forward, or the Board of Finance is recommending it move forward. It's just the money's being spread out a little bit differently. And I would also, I know that Michelle's going to, or Dr. Koo is going to speak to this, but I would also like to thank Dr. Rodrigue, Bob Gerbert, Alan Adriani, people, Deb Zukowski. Mrs. Zukowski has taken notes and shared them with us of all these meetings. It's been very helpful, and we've really worked well as a team. And I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that this has been a wonderful effort, and I believe a success. Okay. I hope I didn't miss anything, but I think that's pretty much.
It's a success to this point. Now we have to make it through the legislative council and the referendum. Yeah, thank you. All right, so Ms. Zukowski, did you have something to add?
Yeah, so some of the, as Dan said, it's looking like the Hawley HVAC has been split into 3 projects, 3 phases across the next 3 years. But one of the things is that the Board of Finance just wasn't comfortable with the amount of the estimate, because it had been 6.3, it then turned into 7.3 when they went to air versus refrigerant, I think. And, you know, in 2015, it was 14 million. So they were not comfortable. But I think the plan is the engineering study is going to come up with a much, much better number, say the end of April. So the end of the number with more confidence just isn't going to be ready in time for the referendum, which is why they just said, we're going to do 1.5 million to get the project started. My understanding is once they have the real a better number, that they're going to amend the CIP and try and put it to the next 2 phases to a vote in November. So it's not like it's all going to be delayed by yet another year and yet another year. And so if that happens and the people agree, then the construction can be pretty much seamless from one phase to the next phase, going through the spring and into the summer next year. The other thing is, one of the things that they wanted to do in terms of the middle school project is that they've learned from this experience that having an engineering study right in front of the actual construction doesn't give enough time necessarily to actually get good numbers, Because by the time you say it's okay, you appropriate the money for the engineering study, you're already into the summer. So what they're trying to do particularly is keep 2 years between, or 1 year in between the engineering study, so that they can get better numbers and not repeat history, and then go on to the actual appropriation for the construction when the number is more firm. So that's my understanding of some of the other things that were, being bandied about.
Okay, thank you. I just want to clarify, I know that $14 million number was spoken about last night at the Board of Finance meeting. The project has never, ever been $14 million, ever estimated to be $14 million. I think at the most it was near $10 million at one point, but it's gone up and down many times. And I do understand the Board of Finance's discomfort with dealing with an estimate at this point. And so I just wanted to speak to the fact that the Board of Finance did grapple with some very difficult issues around the financing and the timing of a referendum. And so I appreciate the conversations they had, and I wanted to thank Dr. Rodrigue and Bob Gerbert and our own board members for these conversations and making it work. But I also wanted to thank Bob Mitchell and Alan Adriani of Public Building and Site, because they added a lot of honest and expert input to the conversation. I think that was invaluable, so I appreciate that. And I will stop there and ask if anybody else has any comments before we move on. All right. We have other committees. Yes, Ms. Perman.
I think you called on me. You're having definitely a problem with your connection or something, Dr. Koo. The policy committee met last week. We are continuing to go through the personnel policies and also talk about our strategy for bringing forward the big slew of policies that we have completed to the board in the most efficient way. So you'll see 2 of those policies now, and then you'll be seeing a lot of policies coming through at future meetings. We've been doing a lot of work at the policy committee, so we really want to make sure that we can bring those to you in a timely fashion and then move them forward to our policy book. So that's my update, but we continue to work hard, and I do appreciate the hard work of Suzanne Duramo, who's been coming to all of our policy meetings lately as we plow through the personnel policies.
All right, thank you. I don't know, I keep switching my audio to, can you hear me now? Okay. I'll keep trying.
You're cutting out again.
I have like 3 different choices for my microphone, and none of them seem to be working. How about now? For a minute. All right. Any questions or comments on policy? Any other committee reports, liaison activities? Yes, Mr. Cruson.
The District Safety and Security Committee met on, I think it was last Thursday. And it was a relatively short meeting. The bulk of it was discussing complications that have arisen on safety and security and all the quarantining that's had to go on, and how that's taxed both. There was talk about how it's had to be dealt with both on the school level and how it's affecting the town. And that was, as I said, that was the bulk of it. So fun stuff.
All right, thank you. All right, any other liaison activities? All right, so we'll move on to our high school student representative reports. Mr. Jerfy and Ms. Clore, do you have a report for us?
Hi, everyone. So, as you know, we recently switched to fully online school, and the transition, I would say, has been pretty smooth. Teachers have had lesson plans and they've had all the work planned out, so there's not too much confusion. And they've made themselves very available for extra help so students can schedule times to meet with them online. In terms of clubs, different club leaders are organizing how meetings will go and are still making schedules as they see fit. For National Honor Society, which is a bit of a bigger club, they're still in the process of planning the new induction ceremony as well as a new way to hold meetings. Moving on to sports, winter sports have been pushed back. I'm not sure to when exactly, but I believe the timeline to begin is January for now. Some student athletes were trying to get practices going. However, no group practices will be allowed as of now. Students are allowed to use the track on their own if they wish, but no large groups. That is my report.
I will continue off of that. So good evening, members of the Board of Ed and Superintendent Dr. Rodrigue. So as Rochelle mentioned, we're all online now, and we are both in cohort A, so neither of us have actually been in school since our last board meeting. But I want to talk a little bit about what each day was like the day-to-day for students in our distance learning schedule. So starting off, we get more sleep. You don't have to get your stuff packed, put on your shoes, drive to school, take the bus. You really just wake up, get dressed, and walk over to your desk, wherever that may be. But before first period starts at 8. But I will suggest that it's probably better waking up like 30 minutes before class starts and not right before. Some of my classmates definitely do look very tired, but I think it's better to wake up earlier so you have like a better morning routine, get something to eat, and just like brighten your eyes so it doesn't look like you just got up. After that, we have our first period, so 80 minutes long. And once that's over, we have a quick 5-minute break. So you can get up and go to the bathroom quickly, or sometimes what I like to do is try to join the next Google Meet like a couple minutes early to kind of like talk to my teacher and say hello a little bit, like you would do if we were in school, because you'd walk in before the bell and talk to them. So I think this kind of like makes up for it being online. Although it is nice to stand up and like get your blood flowing, so you can try to do both because you have 5 minutes. And then we have 2 more periods before lunch. And something I like about classes is that they're not always just a teacher lecturing and a student listening. So sometimes we get assigned independent work, or now more recently, Google Meets came out with these breakout rooms. So our teacher can put us in rooms with students from our class so we can work on stuff with them, like if we were doing group work, which is nice. And they can pop in and see and make sure we're doing our work, which is a little different than like FaceTiming outside of class, and it's just a lot easier, I feel like. This learning continues for second and third period, and then our lunch break is at 12:12. And so now we have an hour, 12:12 to 1:12, and I think having an hour for lunch is very nice, because when I end period 3, and I'm often find myself like finishing an assignment or checking on something on Google Classroom, and I can't just like immediately get up and go to lunch as if I was in school. So having the extra cushion of time is definitely nice, and I appreciate that we got the hour in the new schedule. Sometimes I'll FaceTime my friends or like to talk to them during lunch to act as if we were actually sitting in the cafeteria together, to like see what we're all having. And I will say it takes a little bit more planning now, because now I have to plan my own lunch and that break and make sure, get myself fed and ready for last class of the day. So last class, as I said, starts at 1:12. So I return to my computer at like 1 o'clock-ish to get ready. And then at 2:32, the school day is over. It's a little unusual in the morning not getting up and saying the pledge or listening to the daily announcements, but I think the transition, like Rochelle said, has gone very smoothly. Since we have no daily announcements, I think it's very important that we encourage, or like students encourage to like check the website or the Twitter page or their email so that they can stay up to date, since we aren't getting those in the morning. One thing I think everyone finds a little difficult about the distance learning schedule is staying seated in front of our screens for extended periods of time every day. But I mean, it is pretty unavoidable, because there's no other way to like meet with your teacher until we can go back to face-to-face contact. So I think students should try to minimize their screen time after the day is over, or teachers could like just like in the middle of class, like have like a break to just like stand up and stretch just for like a minute or two would be nice. Some of my teachers do this, but I think more could, because I don't have very many teachers, so I'm not sure about the rest of them, but I think it would be a good idea. So like Rochelle said, clubs and activities are trying to do their best to meet and stay active during the distance learning period. Most clubs are keeping members updated via Google Classroom. So for example, Unified Basketball is still hoping we have like a real in-person athletic season in the winter. But for now, to stay updated, they just activated their Google Classroom. So, and they posted today. So students interested can like stay up to date and know when things are going to start. So I think that goes for the majority of clubs like the National Honor Society and all the different ones. As for athletics, winter sports have been postponed and fall sports are ended. So in the meantime, the athletic department at Newtown has partnered up with the Newtown Social Services to collect gift cards to local grocery stores to help families this holiday season. So they have contactless, it's completely student-led, and they have contactless drop-off, which started today and will continue every following Monday from 3 to 6 p.m. outside the high school lobby. And then finally, seniors, a little senior update. Seniors that applied for early decision and early action deadlines will start to hear back from like now to the mid-January. So I've been hearing from some of my friends and it's getting pretty exciting. It's kind of like just kicking in that we're actually leaving next year. And that is the end of my report.
Great, thank you. All right, any board member questions? I see Ms. Zukowski.
Yes. First, I want to say thank you. This is your reports are wonderful. And I really appreciate last time when I asked about hearing, from some of the arts activities, you talked about the marching band and the likes of that. And I know you may not have the contacts, but if possible, would you be able to give us more information on some of the other arts groups, like the theater group or the choirs, what they're doing? I know that the physical artists may be having exhibitions, to just keep us up on what's going on with that segment of the school population. If you have if you know people in that, it would be very nice to hear what they're doing. So thank you very much.
Yes, I think we can definitely report on that. I plan on future reporting on like the electives like culinary and what they're doing. So I wasn't able to this report, but I will get that next time.
All right, thank you. Mr. Voros, did you have a question or comment?
No, I have a comment. Jillian, thank you so much for your rendition of what your daily schedule is like. Thank you very much for doing that. Thank you.
Of course, thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments? All right, thank you very much for filling us in on what this new schedule is like and what's going on at the high school. We appreciate it. Looking forward to the next, what all new is happening next meeting. Thank you. All right, so that'll bring us to our presentations, and we have a first read on conversations on race curriculum. And we have Amy Deeb here and Dr. Longabuco here to speak about that curriculum. I don't know, who does the introduction here, or do you need no introduction? Do I need to let you share the screen?
Yes, please.
Okay. Oh. Did that allow it?
Yes, it did.
Okay.
All right. I'm so excited to give this presentation. Okay, so I'm going to actually, if I can, I am going to hold on. I am.
Is that working,
going-
Amy?
Yeah, it's working. What I'm going to do is I'm going to minimize my screen because I realized we didn't have printer ink before. So I have everything scripted because I kept it around 10 minutes. So here we go. I'm so excited to be here. So I'm going to tell you all about my course. So thank you everyone for having me. My name is Amy Deeb and I'm the Social Studies Department Chair at Newtown High School, and I am the proud teacher of this course, Conversations on Race. I want to tell you, if I could teach this course all day, every day, I would. It has completely changed my life and countless other students' lives throughout the last 16 years of teaching this course. So Conversations on Race is a course about getting comfortable talking about controversial issues and topics, looking at perspective, inequality, privilege, the historical roots of racism and race in the United States. This is not the course that answers all of the questions or the be-all, end-all for diversity courses in our high school, but it's a great way to start the conversations and enhance and add to many of the courses we already offer. So the course focus is on the learning of how race shapes a person's perspective, as well as analyzing what Blacks and whites must do to create racial healing. This course primarily looks at the history of Black people within the United States. Conversations on Race may be taught in conjunction with an urban partner school. Students have the opportunity to participate in field trips where students in each school will meet and work together on course material. Some of the school opportunities may present themselves in which students are able to explore the culture and experiences of different schools, communities, and people of color. The Newtown Board of Education originally adopted this curriculum in 2004. It was implemented in 2004 and 2005, and I have taught this course successfully for the past 16 years. Conversations on Race is a social studies / humanities semester elective that is offered to students grades 10 through 12. We offer roughly 2 sections a year with about 45 students taking it, but that is of course variable to student sign up. In the past, we had consistent exchanges between Bassick High School and Danbury High School. Bassick is in Bridgeport. Numbers tended to be higher. And we usually had about 3 sections a year. With a very good chance of a new partnership with Bunnell High School, I can see this number rising. The course can be successful with or without a partner school, as I have taught this course successfully without a partner school for the past 2.5 years. And then there were periods of time before that I didn't have a partner school. It was my mission this year to find a sister school, and I'm happy to report that I did. So a couple of things to know, just so it can set everything up for you. I have been working in a relationship with Bunnell High School in Stratford, Connecticut for next year. I have a connection with the former superintendent and assistant superintendent, Dr. Janet Robinson and Dr. Linda Gato, respectively, the humanities department chair, who was a former social studies teacher at Newtown High School, Kirsten Hardy, and the teacher who set to teach the course at Bunnell was the teacher I originally taught the course with starting 16 years ago at Bassick High School. So we have a rapport and a relationship. This partnership will allow field trips to occur between the 2 schools and the opportunity for us to follow the same curriculum that will ultimately allow for deeper and more meaningful learning in addition to breaking down stereotypes. It will also allow us to plan a course of action we can take to create racial healing. This relationship has the ability to take this course to the next level. The principal at Bunnell High School is in full support, and it is budgeted for next year. The only way that the field trips don't take place is if we are not in school for COVID. The second thing I think it's important for the board to know is another course we'll be offering, and it kind of puts Conversations on Race in perspective as well. There will be a second course that we will be offering, which is an African American / Black and Latino Puerto Rican Studies course. It will be offered at Newtown High School starting in the year 22-23. This is a state mandate. This will be a full year elective course offered to students grades 10 through 12. I had the chance to preview some of the curriculum a couple of weeks ago, and this will really focus on the historical and modern triumphs and struggles of these groups of people in America and throughout the world. This will take place of our current African Studies and Latin American Studies course, but will help support our other area studies classes that include Asian Studies and Middle Eastern Studies. Together with these courses, along with sociology, conversations on race, world religions, will help the diversity awareness and understanding within the Newtown community. So Kim, if you could move us to the second slide, please. So our first unit is on perspective. In this unit, students will be introduced to the skills and concepts that will be applied throughout the course. Students will learn about the impact that perspective has on their life and the importance of how it is shaped. Students will systematically examine how their actions are a manifestation of their beliefs on course topics. Students will individually reflect on how their perspective has been formed by looking at their own background and personal experiences. Some of the learning opportunities that I have in this unit, and you can see on the screen the concepts and the concepts and the lenses and some of the things I wanted to highlight. So briefly, the first thing that's most important to do within our class is to establish ground rules to ensure that students feel comfortable, and these become the class expectation. We talk about whether or not racism still exists within the United States, and students have to prove their why or why not. I show a film documentary called Skin Deep, which introduces students to the concept of perspective and why college students in this case have the ideas and stereotypes and perspectives that they do and where those come from. We have a discussion on the N-word, and students, what you'll see in all of the activities that I'm presenting is there's difference in modalities of learning and the ways that students learn. So we read articles like or pieces of a book called The Protein N-Word by Randall Kennedy, Gloria Naylor's The Meaning of a Word. We watch the show Blackish, which is on ABC, it talks about the N-word. So we're really looking looking for different perspectives. And the final assessment that we do in this unit is based off of Spike Lee's 1989 film, Do the Right Thing, which is based on race relations in the US, obviously directed by Spike Lee. The analysis of the film highlights the concept of differing perspective, and the film has tremendous connections today with the death of George Floyd. The next slide, please. Kim. All right, so the next unit is inequality. In this unit, students will continue to form their own perspective by exploring relevant issues that they may not even be aware of. Specifically, students will explore topics of race privilege, education equality, social class, and the camouflage of racial issues. Moreover, the unit will address the issue of fault and blame in relation to the preservation of the status quo. As students increase their awareness of current events and issues, they will reflect on initial ideas from Unit 1, which include perspective. Some of the learning opportunities that students have in this article, it's really sometimes the first time students have learned about social class. So there's different readings and videos on social class. Then we get into analyzing strategic school profiles, which for many students is the first time that they're analyzing data from different school districts. And next year, with our partnership with Bunnell, I intend to analyze the Bunnell strategic school profile and compare it to our own. And we'll look at things like differences in education, course offerings, SAT scores, and we're actually doing that right now in my class. I will show students a documentary, a quick 1-minute clip actually on the Black Doll test, which was used to help the Brown versus Board of Education court case in 1954. We talk about the concept of white privilege. We use Peggy McIntosh's famous article, Unpacking the Backpack, which talks about 47 advantages that she describes as white privilege. And for the first time, it's students actually thinking about, oh, does white privilege actually exist? We look at the injustice of marijuana arrests. We look at New York Police Department's controversial stop and frisk policy, which is actually adopted across the nation. And then we look at the mass incarceration of in an age of color blindness, which was done by Michelle Alexander in her book, The New Jim Crow. And then finally, we debate should affirmative action be eliminated. In our third unit, yes, perfect, the historical roots of inequality. What we do is In this unit, students will juxtapose their perspective on the historical roots of modern day issues. Students will examine issues of the past, such as slavery, the Jim Crow laws, civil rights movement, to understand that perspectives have historical ties that continue to affect us in the world that we live in today. We will also explore current movements, such as the Black Lives Matter movement. Students will be asked to participate in authentic conversations on race and the responsibility of global citizens. Just a couple of highlights. We researched the origins of slavery. We do a web quest activity that takes us through the Jim Crow period. We do a song analysis of Strange Fruit by Billie Holiday, which talks about lynching in America. I showed them a documentary on the death of Emmett Till, who was lynched as a 14-year-old boy in Mississippi and really was a step to the civil rights movement. We talk about the true story of Rosa Parks and what the Montgomery bus boycott did. We analyzed quotes by Martin Luther King Jr. We watch a documentary on the Greensboro Four, and that connects back to Martin Luther King Jr. and his whole idea of nonviolent direct action and protest. And then we're going to compare Black Lives Matter to Freedom Summer of 1964, but also to analyze whether or not it's a modern day civil rights movement. And then our final unit is course of action. And this is a final project. And students will be given the opportunity, it's a 2-week period of time, to engage in civil discourse about issues of race and responsibility of global citizens with other students. The summative assessment will ask the students to draw on course learnings using the generalization of, for there to be change in systemic racism, an individual must take a stance and act. Through this course of action, students will be able to identify an issue or problem that they see within the United States, within Connecticut itself, or within Newtown itself. They will be able to take, research, analyze, and defend a stance on that issue. They will identify an audience, and then they will prepare a suggestion for a movement on the issue. This can be done individually or in collaboration with our sister school partners. This will allow students a voice. Many students have been wondering what role or what their role can be when it comes to addressing racial issues within the United States, and this gives them the chance to do that. I feel this is one of the most important courses at Newtown High School that Newtown High School actually has to offer, and I assure you that each student who walks in my door the first day of any semester walks out a different student and person at the end. I look forward to the new opportunities this course will offer our students, and truly look forward to teaching it for years to come. That is my presentation.
Thank you so much. I am sure we have questions. This is so relevant right now, and I think we talked about this in curriculum and instruction, how this just happens to be curriculum that's up for review this year, and the timing just is really perfect. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Yeah, Dr. Rodriguez.
Well, I just wanted to say, Amy, what an outstanding job. And I've seen this from the beginning, way back when. So it's been a great journey. And I love the generalization because it really connects to some of the things that we have in policy, like the definition of upstander and really taking an active role in diminishing systemic racism. So kudos to you. And I love the connection with Benel and Kirsten. And it's just, I'm so excited. You've done a great job. You've done an outstanding job with this.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Ms. Herman-Stites?
No, I love this, obviously, and I love the way that you've been able to weave some real current topics into it to make it relevant. I just wish, all our students could take this course because I think it's that important, and maybe we'll get there at some point. I know we're working towards, really making sure that language and that knowledge is embedded into the curriculum at all levels and not just in one course, but I really appreciate all your hard work, and I'm excited to see it, and I'd love to take the class myself, just like all your classes that you present here. So
thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate all your work on this.
Thank you so much.
Yes, Mr. Cruson.
I heard a lot about this when we talked for the newsletter article, but I just wanted to say I'm glad that you were able to find another school to work with. That was, I know we talked about the challenges of doing that, but I do think that's a valuable part of the course. So
Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Dalia.
I just wanted to ask a couple of questions. The movie the Spike Lee movie,
Mm-hmm.
do you get parent approval before showing kids that movie? Because that movie's
Yeah.
got a lot of really serious language, and there's a sex scene in it, and
I skipped that scene 19. I always skip that scene.
Okay.
And I send a letter before to all the parents,
Okay.
and the parents have the opportunity to opt out. It is our summative assessment for the unit. But I would, of course, there are other assessments that I could put in place of that. But the parents always get an opt out if they do not feel comfortable with their kids seeing it. And I always brace the kids for what they're going to see, especially knowing the students that we have coming in. I always brace them for what they're going to see.
Yeah, it's got to be okay. So the parents know what they're watching before they.
Yep.
Oh, great! Thank you.
Yep.
And
it is put in the intro letter and then sent out about 2 weeks before we see the film. So they have 2 opportunities.
Perfect. Can I continue, Dr. Koo?
Yes, please do.
What, I'm curious, you said at the end they have to take a stance. I'm just curious for shy kids that are not, and maybe I'm sure this has happened over the 16 years. Is there a way for them to take a stance that's subtle?
Yep. So they can write a letter to the editor. They can create a display case at school if they wanted to. So really, this is kind of like pick your own path when it comes to differentiation for students and student choice. So they have the opportunity to work by themselves, to work with other students. Now that we have a partner school again, to work with partner school kids. And it really is designed for the introvert, the extrovert, anyone can find success in this class. As long as they come in with an open mind. So there is absolutely, I don't think there's anything I've ever denied, and the kids come up with what they want to do. So it's their comfort level.
Thank you. If nobody else has more questions, I have a few more.
Does anybody have questions? All right, Mr. Dalia, go ahead.
I was curious, and it's probably not relative to this course because you said that you told us the focus, but do you offer courses where they talk about indigenous people or people from India, or, I'm just curious if for addressing all forms, could you speak to that for a second, if you don't mind?
So, absolutely. So sociology last year, when we approved it in May, one of the main topics of our dominant minority group is indigenous people. And we look at that through the lens of minority. And we do talk about the history of Newtown, how in 1996, we switched from the Indians to the Nighthawks. And we look at the controversial issues that are happening within the NFL and Major League Baseball today. So that is absolutely something that we discuss. And then when you talk about in many of our area studies courses, so in Asian studies, we are absolutely talking about groups of people within their countries, but also within the United States and acclimating to that culture. So we absolutely identify and talk about actually people from India. Ryan Eberts is one of our teachers who traveled to India last year. And he shares tremendous stories about his experiences there. So I think through our area studies and kind of our diversity within sophomore year in particular, we are able to speak to and help students broaden their horizons from outside of just Newtown High School.
Thank you.
Do you have more, Mr. Dalia?
I do.
Go ahead.
This is just a question that just popped into my head when you were discussing slavery. Do you discuss Abraham Lincoln?
We discussed the Emancipation Proclamation of 1861 in one of the readings we do, which is called Moving Toward Equality Under the Law. And students have to understand the history of freeing slaves in rebelling states, but not freeing slaves within states that were so loyal to the Union. So we do talk about Abraham Lincoln, but I wouldn't say we go into a huge detail about Abraham Lincoln. I think we address some more of those things when it comes to our government classes.
Yeah, that might be more relevant there.
Yeah.
Sorry. Does anybody else have any questions, or do I have the show?
Go ahead.
I think that's it, actually. Thank you. I must say, I don't know if we've ever spoken before. Maybe we have, but you are clearly passionate about your profession, and I admire that. And I'm very thankful that you're getting parent permission for that movie.
Yes.
So thank you.
No problem.
As well. And I appreciate all your time tonight. Thank you very much for all you do for the kids.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I actually do have a question, but before, are there any other folks that want to ask questions?
Can I just add one thing?
Yeah, Dr. Longabuco.
Sure. First, thank you, Amy. That was wonderful. And this certainly is an important class. And I think it's important to note that since the graduation standards have changed and all social studies classes now fall under the humanities umbrella, Amy and I are actually looking into expanding the sophomore area studies instead of having conversations on race and sociology and the new potential African and Latino class as an elective. It would be a sophomore social studies option, which will then expand it more. And we anticipate running more sections of these as it becomes the required course for sophomores versus an additional course like it is now. So I think that will target a little bit of a larger and broader population and certainly expand it to more students.
Great, thank you. That's good to hear. That kind of goes into my question, but before I ask my question, I'll just say that I've heard from so many students who have been through this course who just love it and wish, I mean, they want all of their peers to be able to take the course as well. And so I'm glad to hear that it is being made accessible. But the question has to do with it. Do you ever have students in multiple grade level, or is it primarily sophomores and you don't get juniors or seniors, or how?
No, it's actually that a lot of kids sign up sophomore year, but a lot of kids have sociology, and then juniors and seniors take it as well. So I would say it's really a huge, I have probably right now about 10 sophomores in the class, and the rest are juniors and seniors. So I have 21, and next semester I have 25 kids, and it's probably again 10 sophomores, but then, juniors and seniors. So it really is, it's awesome to see that students like take initially like a sociology and then want to follow it up with conversations on race or conversations on race first and then sociology. So it really is 10 to 12, and, making the kids comfortable and talking, I think, is the most important thing. There's a different type of kid who ends up taking conversations on race. A kid who is willing to put themselves out there emotionally and want to connect to these larger social issues. So I think that spans grade levels, and it makes everyone equal within the classroom.
Good. All right. Thank you so much. I don't know, are there any other questions before we finish up? No. Thank you so much. Your passion always shows through when you come and present to us. And I very much appreciate all the time and effort that you put into this, and emotional energy, because it's fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. So as usual, if you have any questions or comments before our next meeting, if you can just forward them to Ann Uberti or John Voros, will get those questions to Ms. Deeb or Dr. Longabuco before our next meeting. And we'll move on to our old business. So we have a COVID-19 update.
Good, and I know we have Ann Dalton on the line, so thank you, Ann. I'm glad you came this evening. As you know, we are on remote this week, and I will be making a decision tomorrow and consult with both Ann and Donna Colbert. We had our first meeting today where we are looking at data. Again, we're going to meet tomorrow in talking about where we want to move from this point forward, which is obviously next week. We're going to look at trends in the community, staffing, all the important factors that go into this decision making. And I'm hoping to get a communication out to both parents and staff tomorrow. And when Ann and I were talking with the NFT executive board today, one of the things they said is the sooner the better, and I agree. Whether it's staying in remote, moving to hybrid, or in some cases going back in full in some grade levels. Those are all the decisions that we will talk about tomorrow. I was on the DPH, Department of Public Health, this morning. They're meeting with the state epidemiologists again, and I think you talked about that a little bit, Dr. Koo. There is a strong push, but even with the medical experts at the state level, that school is still a very low risk. In terms of the spread of infection. That has nothing to do with the unique issues that every school district faces. And I think I alluded to that when you were asking the question, Mrs. Lideline. We could have staffing issues and our neighboring town might not. So it's very difficult to make a decision that, unless the governor comes out, because there is so much spread of infection, and it just becomes so, as we were back in March, where there might be that kind of closure. I do not see that happening. I have to be honest with you, from everything we're hearing. A lot of this is a different knowledge base of the virus, more information that we know about the virus and the spread of the virus. We are not seeing that spread in school. And I'll give you an example. Ann, was it over 400 quarantined this year? Was that accurate, what you told me this morning?
Yes, 471 in November.
Oh, I'm sorry, in November.
But no transmission in school.
So what that means is, although there were plenty of people quarantined, we did not see cases of any of those quarantined flipping to positive cases. So understand that the number of cases that we've had were much lower than the number of people quarantined. So that is a very important piece of data when we look at our school safe and what mode should we be in. There's a very big difference you need to know between what people's comfort level is, both staff and students and families, versus the actual reality of safety and the health conditions. So one of the things that the state is encouraging, and by the way, I love being on the DPH calls. I know, Ann, you feel the same way, Dr. Sousa, Dr. Carter, just really, their answers, their responses are very timely. They're very calm. They give you very credible responses because things have changed. For one, and I think Mrs. Zukowski, you had emailed a question about the original model and the thresholds and how districts are making those decisions. And if you recall, I have it up all the time. I put the Ed Advance model up that shows the yellow and the and the red, of the orange and the red. When that all started, it came from the actual Harvard Global Health Model. That's where that actually came from. And the number of 25 cases per day, which was the number that was chosen, it was selected by the Harvard Global Health, that indicated less in-person instruction. Again, this was when there was a very different understanding, a very early understanding, or I should say less of an understanding of the virus. I refer, and I think the DPH referred this morning to New York. At that point, a promise was made, if there was 3%, then we need to close all schools. And that's exactly what happened. You know, once you put something like that out there, you kind of have to stick with it. But now in retrospect, you're thinking, I'm sure, and I think, you know, in the changes in New York, it's hard to make that promise now because you realize that there's a very different understanding of the virus and the spread. So that being said, the biggest issue, I think, is that everyone has very different opinions on safety. There are a lot of different factors, but we have to use, and I believe this is, I'm quoting this morning's DPH call, a lot of this comes from really looking at, and Donna Colbert, looking at our own experience in our own district. What has our experience been? What have we seen? As I just mentioned about the lack of spread. We were only on remote this week, just so you know, due to staffing. It wasn't about the number of cases, although cases were upticking, obviously, in the community and across the state. But the real reason we closed was not for that reason. The real reason was because of, you get to a threshold where you cannot possibly function. I mean, I had Ann Uberti, who was doing triple duty, helping out, first at one school and then at another, because of the adults who were quarantining, including principals. What I told the executive committee of the teachers union is we really need to strengthen and look back at what we're doing for mitigation strategies. That's critical. So whatever mode we come back in, we have to make sure that we're back to really kind of square one. Are the students using their desk shield? All the things that we said were important mitigation strategies. You know, once you get back, it becomes comfortable again, right? You kind of know there's a lower threshold, there's a lower spread, things are feeling okay, desk shields come down, maybe teachers gather again around the coffee. Do you know what I mean? Those things, one of the things that the DPH encouraged was, again, pulling the reins in. If you do come back, whether it's hybrid or all in, you have to go back to those mitigation strategies and make sure that we are in complete compliance. It's not easy. We have, especially at the lower levels, you talk to an elementary teacher and they will say it's very hard when you have, you know, lots of third graders or even kindergartners. But again, we've put all the safety strategies in place for teachers and for students, and we have to be compliant, and we have to strengthen those. We continue, our custodians have done an amazing job. I think I've said it, I don't know how many times, about the cleanliness, but that's just as important as well. So we are looking at all of the data. We will be looking at our staffing, whether that's adequate, and making a decision tomorrow as to how to proceed next week and beyond. I will be honest, there are districts out there that are just, staying on remote just for precautionary measures. There are many that are coming back. I've had at least 6 or 7 that I know of in today discussing that. I'll know more on Thursday, but we really have to make the decision for us. What's best? What do we see in our data? Today, the Ed Advance had us at 2%, much lower than we were. So our own numbers are going down in our community. I didn't say the state or neighboring. I'm just talking about in Newtown. We also have a new dashboard that I'll have Ann talk about. We are not only putting up the cases, but also the number of quarantine individuals. Why is that important? Because I can't even tell you how many emails from parents and really had them understand this is why we're in this mode, or this is why we're moving to remote, because we have to function as an organization, as a system, and we have to be safe. And I think we've been very safe. And I want to keep it that way, but I want to make the right decision because I also have to think of the students as well and what's best for them. It might be more convenient to stay in remote, but it might not be the best decision when you look at all the factors. And so there's a lot that I have to think about as a superintendent and make the best decision. Is everybody happy when it's over? No. Just in talking to the staff, you will get a split right away. Just keep us on remote just because it's much easier, or because we have a momentum, or we'd much rather be in. So you get that very diverse perspective no matter what you do. So I have to look at all of those factors and make a decision. Safety is top priority, staffing, being compliant with all of the mitigation strategies, looking at the data and trends in our community, our experience, which is very important, and what's good for students and families and staff. So if that's clear, I hope it is. I want Anne to talk a little bit about the dashboard and what's on there, so that you can, we're trying to be as thoughtful in how we present data, so that families and staff get to see that on our website and understand what is happening in our own district. Anne?
Hi. So the dashboard was sort of a result of the school nurses spending a lot of time speaking to families and staff as a part of contact tracing over the last couple of weeks, and realizing that there was a real need for more information, or for more easily accessible information. So a couple of things. I sent a letter out just with some very basic definition related to contact tracing, what is a case, quarantine information, all of that we were reviewing individually with people as cases appeared, but realized that everyone just needed to know about this. And then in addition, we now have a very simple dashboard that is accessible through the school web. And it gives there in reverse chronological order, the date a case appeared, the date that we learned about a case, what school it was in, how many people were quarantined as a result, and that's divided into how many staff and how many students. So it preserves anonymity and confidentiality, and yet it gives people quick and easy access to that information, because there was demand for that to be readily available to people. So that's what it is. It's very simple. I'm working with Carmen Amadeo to see if I can make it prettier, but the information is there. So it's right on the webpage, right bottom corner.
And I also just add that the CDC, I did not see the information as of yet. I believe it's coming out in a day or two, but the Department of Public Health, again, this morning said that the CDC is looking at a new approach to quarantining, which may lessen the number of days. That will be significant, with testing, of course, but that will be significant for us, for any organization. Quarantining and the number of days is the most difficult, and we've had a very hard time trying to keep up with that. So that, I don't know if it'll be 7 days or 10 days, but better, I think, than the 14 now that we have, as long as it's safe. Bottom line is, I think most important, everyone has to understand, this may change. I may not have 2 weeks to say we're back in remote. While it seems like it should be something that we have some major advanced warning, we do not necessarily. We're trying very hard. I think we've been in a situation where we haven't jumped back and forth. We've tried really hard not to do that. And I want to keep it that way, but I really can't foretell what will happen. January is supposed to peak. Now that doesn't mean necessarily Newtown, but again, we have to be ready to make changes very, very quickly. And I think that's something I want to make sure that every family and staff member and student understands. By the way, thank you, Anne. I brag about you. I have bragged about you in a previous board meeting, just what an outstanding job all of the nurses are doing and you, working very closely with Donna Colbert in the contact tracing. That is why I think we've been able to maintain where we are, is because the contact tracing is just unbelievably quick in Newtown. And that really is the work of our staff, our nurses, and Ann Dalton and Donna Colbert. So I just need to say thank you.
I have to also give credit to the community because people have been
Yes.
wonderful. I mean, that is really key, is everyone's working together, cooperation. So I wanted to also just say, I know this has been said already, but when you hear that big number of people quarantined, 471, it was actually 36 cases. And of all the cases that we've seen all school year, there has not been a case where it spread within the school system. It is all coming from outside of school. So I just wanted to mention that one more time. And Amy Deeb, I have to tell you that my son took your class 10 years ago, and it still comes up at the dinner table every once in a while.
All right.
Well, you bring up a good point too, is when Ann and Donna and I meet tomorrow, we discuss not only the communication and our decision, but what we will add into our communication, tips for the community and families about how to keep us all safe, because what's happening there is very important, and that really spills into the schools.
All right. Thank you.
Welcome.
Are there any board member questions or comments? Yes, Mr. Cruson.
More of a comment. I went looking before you said that the COVID dashboard's on the lower right-hand corner. I went looking for it and it was really hard to find. If I don't know if there's some way to move that entire COVID box somewhere else, like maybe dead center where there's a lot of white space. But it's on a monitor that doesn't have a lot of height. It's going to be really hard for people to find, and I feel like this is important information. So getting it front and center would be good.
We can
Carmen's
talk.
working with me.
Yeah, and we can talk to Carmen, Joanne tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sharing my screen. Can you see?
Yeah.
So it's this right here.
Right, but even on, well, when your screen came up, it was definitely below the fold. And on mine, it's sort of just barely above the fold. So it'd be nice if it was kind of dead center. We seem to have a lot of white space in that school information area. So even if it could just move over there, I think that might be ideal.
So we will, thank you, Mr. Cruson. We will definitely see if we can put that in the middle. Here's an example. It's very simple, but it really does show the cases and those quarantined.
Oh,
No, I am glad that information's up there. That's why I want to make sure that we make it obvious, because I think it's good information that it's
Yes.
good that we're providing that information.
Yeah, really good point. Thank you.
All right. Any other board member question? Mr. D'Elia?
Yeah, I was wondering if it's considered to keep like one school open and while the others are closed, if that's a consideration. Because, for example, I'm looking at the data and Sandy Hook School doesn't seem to have a lot of cases, but they're closed. And I'm wondering if that's something that's been thought about or discussed, or if it's something, Lori, I'm just curious if you've had that conversation or.
We really wanted to keep, our perspective was, we had cases in every school. They might have had less, but we've had cases in quarantining in every school. So we really didn't want to do the haves and have-nots and who's closing, because I'm, just looking around at my neighbors and seeing who's closed, and we're opening up. Again, we were trying to stay away from the bopping, back and forth, because Middlegate had 3, but Sandy Hook only had 1. I'm not sure. I really, deep in my heart, don't feel that's really responsible. I think that it should be consistent and fair to all students and families. And again, that could be open, shut. The way we had cases across the district in every single school. So we are though, however, looking at if this continues, and we did have, let's say, one school that had multiple cases and no other school had it, we may have to make that decision. We just didn't want to do it early on.
May I continue?
Yes.
Yeah, and or maybe it would be like you said, Lori. Maybe it would be. I'm sorry, Dr. Rodriguez. Maybe it would be the elementary schools or the high school has to close, but the elementary can stay open. I see what you're saying.
Yeah. And even I mean, there was a point where we were thinking of closing one of the elementary schools, but then we started. It was that day I was getting other cases in other places, and that's when, because of it was mostly, again, it was really about the quarantining. And the number of individuals quarantining across, we said, let's go remote. Again, it kind of let us reset because we had so many quarantining. But there may be a case when we have to close just the high school and everyone else stays open. We've tried very carefully not to have to do that.
Any other, yeah, Mr. Delia, did you have more?
Has there been any discussion, since we're talking about COVID, about after the holiday break? Because I'm sure a lot of people, I'm not sure. I would imagine people will travel and get together, and I'm wondering if there's any discussion about the week or so after the December break, if there's a plan or something of that nature.
Again, we're going to talk about this tomorrow. To be honest, again, that was the precautionary. You know, it really is dependent on the district. One of the things that I heard when we were on again with DPH that, you know, you can be precautionary, but some are doing a week, some are doing 2 weeks. After a while, it becomes very difficult to know when does it end, because you really, there could be gatherings without Christmas. Do you know what I mean? And so it's just very difficult to base everything on, well, there's a holiday, we need to be closed, or, oh, there's another one coming up and, you know, we need to close. So they're trying to push districts away from doing that and discourage it rather than encourage that. Although districts are doing, you know, they're making their own decisions on that. Some of them, it's because they've had, again, cases and quarantining. And so they're doing it because of necessity, not just because of the holiday.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And Anne, thank you for all your wonderful work. I know, I can imagine you're exhausted. And to all your colleagues, I know how hard it is. So thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments?
Michelle,
Yes, Mr. Voros.
I think this is a question that has, there's no real answer to this question, but I have to ask it of Anne and probably Donna and Lori. We heard the 37 cases were not occurring in the schools, which means they were occurring outside of the schools in the community. How do we get out the message to whomever, parents, community, whatever, that in order for us to keep the schools open, we all have to be hyper vigilant about what we're doing, especially in the presence of these children. Now, how do we do that more vehemently than we've been doing it? I guess is my question. Thank you.
Well, I think it's a good question, Mr. Voros. And earlier when I was talking about the communication, one of the things I mentioned was that Anne and Donna and I will, aside from the communication about how we're going to proceed, we are going to put in some very clear advice for both staff. It's really the community in general, that in order for us to do what we're doing and stay open, no matter what mode that is, there are some things that have to happen as a community. So that's how we can the best we can do is share that information. We can't, very difficult to control, but we can do our best to share that information and that guidance.
Yeah, and just for your information, John, Donna Colbert is not here. It's Ann Dalton and Lori
Right.
Rodriguez. I know you mentioned her. I just wanted to make sure you know she's not
No,
here.
I know, I know she's not there,
Okay.
but they'll relay that information. Okay, and then I have one more thing. Would it help if we asked Dan Rosenthal to get on the phone again on Friday evenings and say whatever to whomever?
I don't
know.
Yeah, so I think any messaging is helpful. I think from the first selectman, and that's what I was talking about earlier about the the Department of Public Health has a chart on their website that says as soon as the numbers go above 15 cases per 100,000, that's a point at which the first selectman has the ability to limit things in the community. And I do think it is a matter of everybody doing their piece. But as Dr. Rodriguez said, I don't know how much we can impose that on other people. It's a matter of messaging over and over again from all of us.
I know that messaging is happening on a, parent to nurse basis on a daily basis.
Right.
And I think within the school, we've done a good job getting that message out. That's the reason that spread is so low in school, because everyone gets that message and repeats it and makes sure it happens for the most part. I mean, we are distanced, we are wearing masks. Those things are happening, which is why school doesn't see spread. But you're right, getting that message out to the whole community and reiterating it is really important. I think the other thing that has changed recently is the team sports. I'll pause on that, which I think may make some difference. And it's not, in my opinion, it is not the actual athletic event that's a concern. It's the human nature of gathering before and after the event that seem to be causing problems, spread.
Yes. So maybe tomorrow when you speak with Donna, she might be able to come up with some protocols that she can initiate along with maybe Dan or whomever to get that message out, since she's the health director.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I have a theory that just closing the schools doesn't necessarily stop the spread, because as you've pointed out, there's not a lot of spread happening in the schools, but it does make people really aware that there's an issue going on, and they do become more careful, I think. Not that that's how we want messaging. That's not how we want to have to send the message, but I do think that that is a secondary effect of what happens when we have to go to distance learning. All right, are there any other questions or comments? Ms. Ledline.
I have a question that I don't know can be answered now, but I wondered if there was any discussions around what part the vaccinations might come into play with regard to this. And I realize it's super early on, but I've got to believe that the conversation regarding that has to start sooner rather than later. So I'm just wondering about that.
Well, I will defer to Ann. We talked about vaccinations, and I know that's coming. The one thing that you just reminded me of was the testing at our health-based clinic. And did you want to, that just reminded me when Mrs. Leidline brought that up. And then we can, I don't have an answer right now about the vaccinations, But I know that, and again, it's going to go to vulnerable populations first and all of that. So I don't even have a timeline. But what's really good, I think, and again, another reason to make the right decision about where we move forward is because we will have our health-based clinic with testing for students and staff now. So we're a pilot, one of the pilot districts that are doing it. Do you want to talk on that, Anne?
Sure. So we have started just within the past week through our school-based health center to offer rapid testing. It's the Binax Now test, which has been made available by the federal government. They have sent out a huge millions of these tests throughout the country. So our APRN at the school-based health center, Ariel, has gone through the training to be able to administer this, and it's available now on a limited basis. It is really only appropriate to be used for people who are symptomatic. And so right now we are aiming at people who are in the school, students or staff who develop symptoms within the school day and would then come to the school nurse and be referred to the school-based health center for testing. The beauty of it is that we're able to offer it on a drive-up basis. So the person, let's say a staff member who didn't feel well, would leave immediately to go home, but then would call and make an appointment and be able to drive to the middle school, pull up at the side door, the nurse would come out to them, do the test, and be able to give them a result before they left. So the limitation of this test, if you may know this already about rapid tests, the limitation of them is that if you get a negative result, it is not always reliable. Positive results are quite reliable. Negative results require a second test with a PCR test. So, and School-Based Health Center is hoping within a short period of time to be able to offer both types of testing, so that if that was negative, they would follow it up and do the PCR test as well. But so that's a great new thing that we're able to offer even on a limited basis. So, and vaccine, once again, there's so much unknown at this point with vaccine. We don't know what will be available, when it will be available, who it will be offered to first. But I can say that just on a preliminary basis, Donna and I are already talking about it, who can the school nurses be part of the people who would be able to administer them. So we're thinking about it, talking about it.
All of that is good news. So I have a question about the Binax testing. Is it available, say if a student at Middlegate School has symptoms, would their parent be able to make an appointment and bring them to the middle school for the drive-up testing?
Yes, you do not have to be a school-based, you don't have to be registered with School-Based Health Center.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah. And they also said that in a situation where a student was coming in with symptoms and arrived, a family member was driving with them, they would offer that to the family member as well. So.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, that's good. Anybody have any questions or comments? No. Okay. Fantastic. Thank you, and Ms. Dalton, so much for all you're doing. And please thank all of the school nurses who are helping out in this unusual year. I know they're going way above and beyond what they would do during a normal school year, and we all appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, so that brings us to our second read and possible action on the Women's Studies curriculum, which we had from our last meeting. So I'll entertain a motion on that.
I move that the Board of Education approve the Women's Studies curriculum.
Second.
All right, so Mr. DeLeo makes the motion. Mr. Cruson seconds the motion. I don't believe there were any questions received between last meeting and now. Mr. Voros, do you have a question or you're getting ready to vote?
No, I'm voting.
Okay. So are there any questions or comments now before we vote? Sensing none, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? None, so that passes unanimously. And that brings us to our world literature curriculum, and I'll entertain a motion on that one as well.
I move that the Board of Education approve the world literature curriculum.
Second.
All right, so Mr. D'Elia makes the motion, Mr. Kusan seconds the motion, and again, I don't think there were any questions, but are there any now? Mr. D'Elia?
I read through this curriculum. I just found it fascinating. I just wanted to say that this looks like a really interesting course, how literature and art changes over time, and our perspective might not be the artists or the author's original intent, and how everything changes over time. And I just thought this was quite an interesting, this looks like a really interesting course. So I just wanted to, I was very impressed with this. That's all.
We have board members who'd like to return to high school this evening. All right. Thank you, Mr. D'Elia. Are there any other questions or comments? All right, sensing none. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. So that passes unanimously. And that brings us to our new business and the discussion and possible action on our snow day protocol.
I have a question for Dr. Rodriguez before I make the motion.
Yeah.
Dr. Rodriguez, this is just for this school year, correct?
Yes, yes, and according to the state, you can only utilize this waiver, if you will, where a snow day can count as a regular day remotely this year.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure. I just wanted to clarify it in my motion so that it's.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to make a motion.
Yes, please.
I move that the Board of Education approve the snow day protocol as presented for the school year 2020-2021.
Second.
All right, so Mr. D'Elia makes the motion and Mr. Kusan seconds the motion. And then I will.
You're going to put it up, Dr. Koo?
Yeah.
I know you all received it. Sorry we sent it to you late, but we had to tweak a few things. Ann and I had a meeting of the minds with administrators. Dr. Gambos, I believe, was on that, and Dr. Longabuco. And we've, certainly spoken with staff about this. So just so you know, the state, the guidelines, again, only for this year, only for during the pandemic, a snow day may count as a regular school day. And some of the guidelines include hours, so it has to be at least a 4.5 hours for elementary and 5 for secondary, with a mix of synchronous and asynchronous learning. So that's interesting. Even the state understands kids cannot be online necessarily all day. And so given that those guidelines, we put together some of our expectations if we were to move forward with this. Now, keep in mind, we do not send students necessarily back and forth every day carrying their devices. It's just very challenging, especially for the little ones. So we want to start with, and maybe you can go down as I read them, Dr. Koo. So we do think there's some, we should at least start with 2 days where they're regular snow days. No one has to worry about it. We don't have to know in advance. They remain true snow days. Following the first 2 closures, the district, namely me, will then determine, based on the timing of the impending storm and other factors, whether we can use that particular day as a remote learning day and count it as a regular school day. And again, this decision, there's a lot to this. It has to, first of all, it depends on the timing and advance notice of a storm. So we can make sure that all of our students have their devices and they have access to that. When we are alerted where'd it go? To the potential weather. And I normally get a week in advance, and then it gets to 3 days in advance. And when they're really big storms, now some kind of come out of nowhere, but those are more, I think, more rare. We usually know at least a day or two in advance that there is something coming and there's a storm. When we do know that, we will make sure that all the students have their devices. Now, if, and it's more rare in this case, but we have had tornadoes, we have had, blizzards, and whenever a particular storm might cause widespread power outages or issues that make remote learning in Newtown impossible, that has to be taken into consideration. If this occurs, then the school messenger will alert staff and parents that this is a regular snow day, meaning there's no remote learning. And keep in mind, we have staff that don't all live in Newtown. So we have to make sure that we have the staffing. And again, that would only be an issue if there were some really widespread technology issues. Administrators will check in, making sure that we are in compliance and that everyone's online, the adequate number of hours. First of all, that's one of the guidance pieces from the state. So we have to follow that. We will, as you know, tweaking our remote learning schedule. So we will follow the regular remote learning plan as it is in place. Let's see what else. We also are very clear that parents will have to call in just like a regular school day if a student is to be absent. We would have to know this. So we want to make sure that this day in many ways really truly looks like a regular school day, both in the hours, just like remote learning is happening currently, including whether or not students will be online or not. And then teachers certainly might have emergencies or might be out sick as in any other regular school day, and we would want to know that in advance as well. So again, there are a lot of conditions that it's not just, hey, we're going on remote tomorrow because there could be a snowstorm. We want to make sure that all of those pieces are in place and the conditions are right in order to actually have it work. I guarantee there'll be more remote learning and it won't be an issue because normally we do know 24 hours at least in advance that something is coming. And in that case, we would make sure that students are taking home their devices. Might be a day or two, but at least we know and the parents know that this is a possibility. So students will be bringing home devices. So we tried to simplify it and make it very clear and concise so that everybody understands how it's going to work.
All right, so does anybody have any questions or comments? Yes, Ms. Zukowski.
Are there accommodations for teachers who have young children at home and, they won't be able to get help coming in if the snow's all over the road? Is that just going to be on a case-by-case emergency type of concept, or is it going to be where it's planned ahead that somebody would be filling in for that teacher?
We really do know. Again, it really is just like any other school day. Everyone has a responsibility as an employee. But if there was an emergency, that's what I mean. Whether you're absent or there's an emergency and there's a daycare issue that could happen tomorrow without snow, where we have to deal with that. So again, it's on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, thank you.
And I think every school system is understanding because we're in the business of children. So we also understand that on the part of our employees.
Any other questions or comments? No? I'm sensing none.
Okay.
So we'll vote on that. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None? I think that was unanimous. Yes, okay. Let's see, so that will bring us to our first read on our policies. We have 2 of them. Ms. Herman Stites, did you want to review with us what these are?
Yeah. So these are 2 policies that the policy committee looked at. Feels like quite a while back. They're policies that are required by law. We started looking at them when we had a previous assistant superintendent, decided to hold on it until we had a new assistant superintendent, and then she had time to review, since she plays a pretty major role in both of these policies. So we basically took the CABE suggested policies and made some minor edits to them, which you'll see in red. The first policy, hold on, I'm just trying to pull up the right screen. The first policy is policy 5145-5. It's sexual discrimination and sexual harassment. You know, it's pretty straightforward. It goes through the definitions and then the procedure. A lot of the meat of this is in, you know, the regulation, which is in the opera. I can't even talk tonight. You know what I mean? In the day-to-day of that policy. I can't say it. It's late. Anyway, so you'll see a lot of that is in the regulation, which, you know, the board does not approve, yet it's how the policy is administered. I don't know if you want me to move on to the next one or ask for questions on this one first, Dr. Koo.
Yeah, we might as well ask for questions if there are any. Yeah, Ms. Zukowski?
I have 2 questions. So the definition, sex discrimination occurs when a person, because of his or her sex, is denied participation in or the benefits of any educational program receiving federal financial assistance. Why is that receiving federal financial assistance there? I know that we're complying with federal law, but don't we want to do better than that? I mean, because you could have, say, Destination Imagination that receives no federal assistance, or science, science fairs that would be no federal assistance. Wouldn't we want just to end the definition after the words educational program?
Ms. Zukowski, I believe, and I understand your point, and, you know, I do agree that, you know, we always want to do better. I believe this definition of sex discrimination is the legal definition that districts are required to use, but I will check on that. And if it's not something that, you know, our legal is, you know, requiring us to use, it seems to be a legal definition and not just a policy definition. So I will definitely check on that at our committee, and we will make changes if we can, because I do agree. You know, we always want to do better.
Mm-hmm. And may I continue with my second question?
Sure.
So one thing with this policy is that it puts the onus of reporting on the victim. And I really like what was done for the racial harassment policy. Let me see if I can pull it up, where you added a paragraph that was entitled Reporting Incidents of Bullying, Harassment, and Racism, where you said basically staff are expected to report any incidents and students are encouraged to reach out to trusted elders if they witness any incidents. Would it make sense to add that type of language here so that it's not always on the shoulders of the victim to get recourse for sexual harassment?
Dr. Rodriguez, do you have an opinion on that?
No, I think it's a good point. We can certainly look at that. I mean, I hadn't really thought of it that way, but it does raise a good point. not to put it on the shoulders of the victim. And I think in that way it might. So we can certainly look at that. It's only a first read. I'd like to see what that looks like once we edit that.
Right.
I think it's a good point. I really do.
I agree. Thank you.
Just piggybacking on that, in looking at the racial harassment policy, I really like that policy, and it's very generous in terms of expectations of what a victim might be able to do. And this one seems a lot more regimented, maybe. So for example, it has a time period, and I know it's a suggested time period that the report should take place, but that it makes it feel a little more like the victim is expected to report within a certain time period, or it's not really an issue.
Are you looking at the regulation?
I probably
Yeah.
was. Or who to report to was the other, I picked out a couple things. It was the time period, who to report to. So for example, it's the principal in the sexual harassment policy versus a compliance coordinator in the racial discrimination policy, or the remedial action to be taken, or whether this should be even reported to the Board of Education. I noticed that I really liked the racial harassment discrimination policy, and
Right. I think a lot of what you're pointing out is in the regulation.
yeah,
And so
probably.
that's, I mean, I agree with you. But I think that would, I would really ask the administrative team to look at that, because I know that that's something that Mrs. Uberti went through extensively. So, I think that they need a chance to kind of go through it and figure out the best way that works for them on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
Because I think everything that you put out, you talked about, is in the regulation. We are required to have the Title IX coordinator investigate. So we really can't, designate someone else to do that investigation. That's a requirement by law. So there are some things that we're required to do with this policy that we weren't legally required to do with the other, interestingly enough.
Yeah.
So
I was going to add that as well. You're right, Mrs. Stites. There are some more stringent, I think, protocols around the sexual harassment. So and mandated things that you're probably seeing that have existed over time that I don't think exist in the other, as Rebecca mentioned. So we can certainly look at that to see what we can lighten up. So they kind of work, because I think you're right. One was a lot lighter than the other, but I think there's a reason around that.
Yeah.
And I think in the policy itself, the policy around the procedures is intentionally vague, to give, as the regulations evolve, or as the law evolves, to give administrative staff the ability to make changes to the procedure. So in the actual policy, it's not laid out. So, step by step as it is in the regulation. It's pretty broad. But I do like changing some of the language, where we can, around, who should be reporting and how. But other than that, we can hold on this again. I think it's an important policy for us to pass. If you wanted us to wait until the administrative team has a chance to rewrite the regulation, we can definitely do that. This policy has been waiting for quite a while. And I do want to say that when policies, like when we do have a backlog of policies, sometimes there are new things that come to light before the policy comes, so it really, that long delay really does lead to, it not being as relevant as it would have been. So I think that's sort of the point that we've been talking about in the policy committee, and how to bring things forward quicker and move them through a little bit quicker, more policies at once, to be able to kind of make sure that we're relevant and timely in our writing. Because I believe that if we had, Ms. Zakowski's points, those maybe would have been rolled into this policy had it been done on different timing. But I just, if you're not comfortable with the policy, with the regulation as it stands, then we should wait on it. I don't.
Ms. Zakowski, did you?
Is it possible to approve the policy on the second read with the caveat that when the regulations are done, that we would be able to review the regulations independently?
We can always review the regulations. The board just needs to understand that we don't approve the regulations ever anyway. And I do want to say that the regulations were written and gone over by the administrative team prior to this.
Yeah.
So what we're presenting to you is the recommendation of the administrative team.
And I think we did approve a policy and then had an update on a regulation recently. We did that. I'm okay with the policy. Do you have a meeting between now and our next meeting? So yeah,
have a meeting. Yeah, and we're gonna, we'll go through any other questions that board members have on the policy itself, including Ms. Zakowski's points that she just brought up. So if anyone has any more questions about the policy, I do suggest if they have questions about the administrative regulation, maybe forward those directly to Dr. Rodriguez so that she and her team can go through that, and ensure that, they understand your concerns.
That sounds like a good approach. Okay, any other questions on this policy? So we can move on to the next one.
Okay, the next one is policy, hold on. My computer is not cooperating. Policy 5145.6, student grievance procedures, Title IX. So again, similarly, this is a policy that was held for a bit until our designated district compliance officer for Title IX had a chance to review, and that is the assistant superintendent. So as you can see, the policy is quite brief with more information about the procedure and the conditions in the regulations. This was again, reviewed and put forward with the approval of the administrative team.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments on this one? Nope. Okay. All right, so your next meeting is next week? Not tomorrow morning?
No.
The way
we fixed that.
Okay.
Most of the time.
So if anybody has any questions or comments, getting them to you before next Wednesday.
Yeah, if you can get them to us by Monday, that's helpful. We know that we have to put that first policy on the agenda, but if we have to put the second policy on the agenda, it would help to know that as we're creating the agenda.
Okay. Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that'll bring us to our action on Ms. Lideline.
Just a quick point. I don't know if I missed something, but is there a reason why we're not voting on the second policy? If there's no questions or no.
We always just do a first read and a second read. So since it's the first read.
Oh, that's the first read. Never mind. See, I did miss something. There you go.
But we can if you want.
Do it.
Thank you.
Speaking of efficient meetings and trying to be productive and efficient, let's just move right through. All right. So we do have action on minutes of November 17th. If there's a motion.
I move that the Board of Education approve the minutes of November 17, 2020.
Second.
All right. I'm just realizing that, well, you can, so Mr. D'Elia, are you voting on this one? You can still make the motion if you're okay with that.
No, I'm not voting on it. No, I'm abstaining. But I can still make the motion, I believe.
Yeah. So it's fine. So Mr. D'Elia makes a motion. Mr. Cruzan seconds the motion. Are there any questions or comments? All right. Sensing none. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And abstentions? All right. So 6 in favor with Mr. D'Elia abstaining. And that brings us to our public participation, our second public participation. So I'll open it up to anyone who would like to address the board at this time and just ask that you keep it brief. Oh, yes, Miss Gabriel.
I told you I was going to do public participation. I have to say my name, Janice Gabriel, 50 Sawmill Road, Danbury, Connecticut. I'm speaking to you as a teacher and the advisor for the fall drama, and wanted to let you know that you will be receiving information from me. But I wanted to let you know that on December 19th, which is a Saturday at 7 p.m., we will be holding our fall winter drama in some format, live streamed, and we wanted to invite all of you. We're getting very creative with our virtual live stream, and we have contingency plan A, B, C, D, and E, depending on how we're moving forward as a district. But our students are very, very excited to still be creating art and theater. And we wanted to extend the invitation to all of you on the board, and Dr. Rodrigue and Mrs. Uberti as well. So you will be receiving information from me by the end of the week about that. But our students are so excited and have been craving this, and it's going to be really fantastic. So we hope that you will be able to join us that evening.
Great, thank you. It's good to hear that things are still happening in some form or another. All right, any other folks who would like to address the board at this time? Sensing none, I will close out public participation and entertain a motion.
To adjourn.
Second.
Mr. D'Elia makes a motion.